Trickle-down theory and tax cuts for the rich. Thomas Sowell, in his new booklet, quote, at various times and places, particular individuals have argued that existing tax rates are so high that the government would collect more tax revenues if it lowered those tax rates. Close quote. Explain that argument.
Oh, the argument is based on the belief that people will change their behavior as you change the tax rates. Those on the left often act as if human beings are just like inert blocks of wood, or like chess pieces that you can move around on the chessboard to put wherever you want to carry out some grand design. But of course, people react to these things. Now, it's a theory, it's a hypothesis, and you could test it. Almost never is it tested. People instead say, oh, you just want to give tax cuts to the rich.
Right. Now, you note in this booklet, brief as it is, you cover a lot of ground here. You write about various times and places people have advocated this, and you note several in particular. Republican Treasury Secretary Andrew Mellon argued for lower tax rates in the 1920s. Democratic President John Kennedy argues for cuts in the tax rates in the 1960s. Republican President Ronald Reagan, lower tax rates in the 1980s, and then George W. Bush lowers tax rates once again in the 2000s. 4 experiments, as it were, one by a Democrat. In each of those 4 cases, what was the effect on the economy?
The effect on the economy was to increase the rate of growth, increase the revenue received by the government. The rich not only paid more taxes after the tax cuts for the rich, as they call it, they paid a higher percentage of all taxes. Then this started back in the 1920s. In the early 20s, the tax rate on the top income was 73%. And the people making over $100,000 paid something like 30% of all taxes. By the end of the decade, the tax rate on the top had been cut to 24%. People making over $100,000 now paid 65% of all taxes. And the reason is quite simple, that when you have the tax rate at 73%, people simply don't pay it. They put their money into tax-exempt securities and arrange their financial affairs. So what we're really talking about, do you want a symbolic high tax rate on the high-income people to win votes politically, which the rich themselves are not going to pay? Or do you really want more tax revenue coming into the government?
So the argument, you say it's an empirical matter. It can be tested. It has been tested.
It has been.
4 different times, and it always worked.
That's right.
All right. In Trickle-Down Theory and Tax Cuts for the Rich, you quote such liberal heroes, progressive heroes as Woodrow Wilson and John Maynard Keynes on the importance of keeping tax rates modest. The Keynes quotation is especially striking. Quote, John Maynard Keynes, taxation may be so high as to defeat its object. A reduction of taxation will run a better chance than an increase of balancing the budget. Close quote. Then you, Tom Sowell, write, at this point there was not yet a sharp partisan difference on lowering high tax rates. Close quote. When did this sharp partisan difference emerge? What happened?
In the second half of the 20th century.
And on account of what?
I guess over time, the Democrats moved further and further left. And so you had in the party only those people who thought it was wonderful to raise tax rates on high-income people.
Trickle down and millionaires. Now, the attack on this theory, which has been tested and shown to work. President Obama in December of last year, the market will take care of everything, they tell us. Jobs and prosperity will eventually trickle down to everyone else. In April of this year, during the Bush years, the wealthy got wealthier, but prosperity sure didn't trickle down. In July, this past summer, Barack Obama, we've tried it their way. It didn't work. We were told that prosperity would start at the top and then trickle down. Close quote. Where does this phrase "trickle down" come from?
Oh, I don't know. It was as far back as the Roosevelt administration. There is absolutely, it is an incredible thing. There is a non-existent theory that is constantly being attacked. Some years ago in my newspaper column, I challenged anybody to cite any economist outside of an insane asylum who had ever made that argument. Nobody ever came up with a single person.
So when Barack Obama says in this past July, quote, we were told that prosperity.
Ask him who told him.
Nobody told him.
Nobody
no
told him.
economist has ever held that. No politician has ever said it.
I don't know of anybody who's ever said it. In fact, when I put this out, and I went out a nationally syndicated column, various people wrote me and said, well, so-and-so said this, so-and-so said it. But find me the person who said it. I don't want to hear how A said that B said it. Find me B and show me where he said it. And that was years ago. Not one example has been offered.
All right. So trickle-down economics is not a political theory. It is a political, I beg your pardon, it's not an economic theory. It is a political hack phrase used.
It's a caricature.
Caricature.
Yeah. In other words, the argument really is not that you should put more money in the hands of the wealthy. It's also part of a zero-sum conception of the economy. There's the thought that if you cut the tax rates on the rich, why then there'll be less taxes for the government, or you'll have to raise the taxes on other people to make up the difference, or cut programs and so forth. So that I hear all the time. It drives me crazy.
So what about this notion, George Bush, it was a giveaway, that George Bush cut taxes on the rich, and if he had not done that, the budget would be much closer to balance. He was just giving it away. It was pointless. The sheer pointlessness.
Yes, but in the paper, I point out where the New York Times itself says, there's been an unexpectedly large increase in tax revenues from the wealthy and from corporations, which has reduced the projected budget deficit. And the question, yes, expectations are in the eyes of the beholder.
Unexpected by the New York Times.
Unexpected by the New York Times, exactly. Right. But that's exactly what people have been expecting for more, at that point, 3/4 of a century, and which has been happening, and the New York Times just chose not to understand it.